lonely virgin nurse drove a drunk CEO home. Never expected he'd fall for her and change her life forever. People like him didn't mix with people like her. This was just one night, one moment of kindness in a world that rarely rewarded either. You have no idea who I am, do you? Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She had saved hundreds of lives in her career, but she never imagined that driving one drunk stranger home would be the night that saved her own. The December wind cut through her scrubs like frozen razors as Vanessa Carter spotted him outside Murphy's Bar on the outskirts of Chicago. Expensive suit, designer shoes, slumped against a lamppost like discarded luxury. After pulling a brutal 16-hour double shift in the pediatric ICU, every muscle in her body screamed for her bed in Cleveland. But something about the way he sat there, not aggressive drunk, just lost, made her slow her beat-up Honda. At 29, Vanessa had perfected the art of being invisible. In hospitals, she moved like a ghost between life and death, saving others while her own dreams gathered dust. She'd never been on a real date, never felt desired, never let anyone close enough to disappoint her the way her father had disappointed her mother. But this man looked like he needed saving. Hey, she rolled down her window, cold air rushing in. You okay? He lifted his head, and even in the dim streetlight, she could see eyes that held more than alcohol. They held exhaustion that matched her own. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and stubble shadowed a jaw that belonged in magazines, not on strangers who needed rescue. My driver left, he slurred, checking his phone. Dead battery. Perfect night for it. Vanessa should have driven away, should have minded her business like every safety video told her. Instead, she found herself saying, "Where do you live?" 20 minutes later, she was helping him into her passenger seat, his cologne mixing with the smell of hospital disinfectant that clung to her clothes. His hand accidentally brushed hers as she guided him in, and something electric shot through her, unexpected and unwelcome. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice clearer now that cold air had hit him. "I know," she started the engine, "but I'm doing it anyway." The drive passed in comfortable silence, her GPS leading them through neighborhoods that grew more expensive with each turn. Mansions replaced apartment buildings. Manicured lawns replaced cracked sidewalks. When they finally stopped, Vanessa stared at the house. No, estate that stretched before them like something from a movie. "This is yours?" she asked. He was studying her face in the dashboard light, and something in his expression made her heart skip. Not from fear, but from possibility she'd never dared imagine. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning she couldn't decode. His eyes were completely clear now, focused on her with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of her faded scrubs, her tangled hair, her exhaustion that showed in every line of her face. "Should I?" she whispered. His smile was slow, genuine, nothing like the practiced charm she'd expected from someone who lived behind gates. "No," he said softly. "That's exactly why I hope I see you again." But as he stepped out of her car, Vanessa knew she wouldn't. People like him didn't mix with people like her. This was just one night, one moment of kindness in a world that rarely rewarded either. She was wrong about everything. She thought she'd never see him again, until he appeared at her hospital with flowers and a confession that changed everything. The pediatric ward of St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with whispers as he walked through the next morning. His $1,000 shoes clicked against linoleum that had seen too many tears and not enough miracles. Nurses stopped mid-conversation, doctors turned to stare, and Vanessa felt her cheeks burn as I followed his path straight to her. She was checking 7-year-old Marcus's for when she heard his voice behind her. "Excuse me, are you Vanessa Carter?" She turned, and there he was, cleaned up, sober, and somehow even more devastating in daylight. The expensive suit fit him like it was made for his body, and his dark hair was perfectly styled. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They looked at her like she was the most important person in the room. "Ah, yes. How did you?" I asked around. He held out a bouquet of white roses that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck. "I never got to thank you properly." The entire ward had gone silent. Vanessa could feel her supervisor's disapproving stare from across the room, could practically hear the gossip already starting. She should have been embarrassed. Instead, she felt something she'd never experienced before. Visible. You didn't need to. I'm Daniel Hayes. He said it like it should mean something. When her face showed no recognition, his smile widened. You really don't know. Should I? She asked again. The same question from the night before. I own Hayes Industries. Hotels, mostly. The Millennium chain. Now, she recognized the name. His hotels were the kind she'd seen in movies. Marble lobbies, crystal chandeliers, the kind of luxury that existed in a different universe from her world of overnight shifts and instant ramen. Oh, heat flooded her face. I had no idea. I am sorry. Don't apologize. He stepped closer, and she caught that same cologne from the night before. Do you know how long it's been since someone helped me without wanting something in return? Marcus tugged on her scrub pants. Miss Vanessa, who's the fancy man? This is Mr. Hayes, she said, crouching to Marcus's level. He's just a friend. He looks like a prince, Marcus announced with the brutal honesty of childhood. Daniel laughed, the sound rich and genuine. What's your diagnosis, buddy? Leukemia, Marcus said matter-of-factly. But Miss Vanessa says I'm going to beat it 'cause I'm tougher than cancer. Something shifted in Daniel's expression as he looked between Marcus and Vanessa. I bet you are. Miss Vanessa seems pretty smart. The smartest, Marcus agreed. She always knows when I'm scared before I even say it. Vanessa felt exposed under Daniel's gaze as he watched her interact with Marcus. She'd spent years being invisible, blending into backgrounds, making herself small. But the way he looked at her made her feel like she was glowing. I should get back to work, she said, standing. Have dinner with me. The words came out rushed, like he'd been holding them back. Not because you saved me, but because I want to know the woman who stops for strangers and makes sick kids believe they can beat anything. Before she could answer, her supervisor appeared. Margaret Hendricks, 55 years old and made of equal parts starch and disapproval. Miss Carter, we need to discuss appropriate workplace behavior. Daniel's entire demeanor shifted. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. I'm sorry. Did I interrupt something important? Margaret's eyes widened as she took in his expensive clothes, his commanding presence. I know, sir. I was just making sure your staff receives the recognition they deserve. His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Because from what I've seen, you have an extraordinary nurse here. The weight of his attention made Margaret shrink back. Of course. Vanessa is. She's very dedicated. I can see that. His eyes found Vanessa's again. So dinner? She knew she should say no. Knew this was a mistake that would only lead to heartbreak. Men like Daniel Hayes didn't date women like her. They collected them, used them, discarded them. But when had anyone ever fought for her attention? When had anyone ever looked at her like she was worth fighting for? Okay, she whispered. His smile could have powered the entire hospital. As he left, Margaret hissed in her ear, You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. But as Vanessa watched him disappear around a corner, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, getting into trouble might be exactly what her invisible life needed. She lived paycheck to paycheck in Cleveland. He owned buildings in 3 states. But somehow, over coffee and conversation, none of that seemed to matter. The small diner felt smaller with him in it. Daniel's presence filled corners that had held nothing but ordinary conversations and forgotten dreams. Vanessa chose this place on purpose, Rosie's all-night cafe, with its cracked vinyl booze and coffee that could strip paint. If he was going to see her world, he might as well see all of it. He slid into the booth across from her, looking like he belonged in boardrooms, not diners where the special was meatloaf and the Wi-Fi password was still password 123. But he didn't seem uncomfortable. If anything, he looked relieved. This place reminds me of home, he said, running his fingers along the worn Formica table. Oh, Los Angeles. Before everything changed, he caught the waitress's attention with a smile that made her blush. Coffee, please. And whatever she's having. Just coffee for me, Rosie, Vanessa said. Honey, your skin and bones. Get the pie. Rosie had been serving coffee and unsolicited advice for 30 years. Apples fresh today. 2 pieces, Daniel said before Vanessa could protest. When Rosie left, silence stretched between them. Up close, in better light, Vanessa could see details she'd missed in the car. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The way his hands moved when he talked. The fact that despite his expensive clothes, there was something genuine about him that didn't match the corporate image she'd Googled. So, she said, hotels. Boring. Millionaire, CEO. Also boring. She laughed despite herself. What's not boring? You. The word hung between them like a challenge. Tell me about Cleveland. So she did. About growing up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to read her bedtime stories. About nursing school at Kent State, where she discovered she had a gift for making scared people feel safe. About choosing pediatrics because kids were honest. They told you when you were helping and when you weren't. Why pediatric ICU? He asked, and something in his voice made her look up from her pie. Because those kids fight harder than anyone I've ever met. They don't give up, even when everything hurts. She paused. I guess I wanted to be like them. Fight for what? The question should have been simple, but it hit something deep in her chest. I don't know. I've been surviving so long, I forgot what I was supposed to be fighting for. He leaned forward, his fingers tracing patterns on the table while she talked. What did you want to be when you were little? Before you decided you needed to save everyone else. No one had asked her that question in years. A teacher. I wanted to have a classroom with those motivational posters and help kids believe they could be anything. She felt heat creep up her neck. Stupid, right? Why is that stupid? Because teachers don't make enough money to take care of sick mothers and pay off student loans, and she stopped, realizing how much she'd revealed. Your mother's sick? Something in his voice made her look at him more carefully. Behind the expensive clothes and confident manner, she saw something she recognized. The look of someone who'd lost people they couldn't afford to lose. Diabetes. It's managed, but the medications are expensive, and she can't work as much as she used to. Why was she telling him this? I moved back home after graduation to help. That's why you work so many doubles. It wasn't a question. Somehow, he'd seen right through her exhaustion to the reason behind it. Family takes care of family, she said, even when it means giving up everything you wanted for yourself. The question hit like a physical blow. When had anyone noticed that she'd given up her dreams? When had anyone cared enough to see the cost? Someone has to be responsible, she said quietly. And you decided it had to be you. Who else? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her face like he was memorizing it. What if someone wanted to help? Help how? However you needed. The offer hung between them, loaded with implications she didn't dare examine. Men like Daniel Hayes didn't offer help to women like her without expecting something in return. But looking into his eyes, she didn't see calculation or pity. She saw something that looked almost like understanding. I don't accept charity, she said. Good. I don't give it. He leaned back. But I do believe in investing in extraordinary people. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just invisible. His voice was gentle but direct. That's what you think, isn't it? That you're forgettable, unremarkable, easy to overlook. Heat flooded her cheeks. Aren't I? Vanessa. He said her name like it was something precious. Last night, you could have driven past me. Should have, probably. It was late. You were tired. I was a stranger. But you stopped. Not because you had to, but because you couldn't drive past someone who needed help. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't. I've been passed by plenty of times. His smile was rueful. You know what I see when I look at you? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Strength. Kindness. Someone who gives everything she has to take care of other people, even when no one's taking care of her. He paused. Someone worth knowing. The words hit her like a physical force. No one had ever described her that way. No one had ever looked at her and seen strength instead of obligation, kindness instead of duty. When he walked her to her car, the gap between their worlds felt like a physical ache. His Mercedes was parked next to her Honda, and the contrast was almost cruel. This was a mistake, she whispered, keys shaking in her hand. His response stopped her cold. The only mistake would be pretending this doesn't mean something. But as she drove home to Cleveland, past neighborhoods that grew shabbier with each mile, she knew he was wrong. Some gaps were too wide to bridge. Some worlds were never meant to touch. She was wrong about everything. She thought she was falling for an available man, until the newspaper photo showed him with someone else. The engagement photo smiled back at her from the business section of the Chicago Tribune. Daniel's arm wrapped around a woman who looked like she belonged in his world. Blonde hair pulled into a perfect chignon, diamonds glittering at her throat, smile sharp enough to cut glass. The caption read, Hayes Industries CEO Daniel Hayes and fiancée Rebecca Thornton at the Millennium Grand Opening Gala. Vanessa's hands trembled as she held the newspaper in the hospital break room. Around her, the usual chaos continued. Nurses grabbing coffee between rounds, residents wolfing down sandwiches, the constant hum of monitors and conversations. But for her, everything had stopped. "You okay, honey?" Rosie from the cafeteria touched her shoulder. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Vanessa lied, folding the paper with shaking fingers. But she wasn't fine. She was an idiot. A naive, invisible little idiot who'd actually believed that someone like Daniel Hayes could want someone like her for real. Of course he had a fiancée. Of course, she was beautiful and sophisticated and perfect for his world of charity galas and business deals. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Had a great time last night. When can I see you again?" The casual tone felt like mockery now. Was this how rich men entertained themselves? Collecting naive nurses while their real lives waited in penthouses and society pages? She was deleting the message when another text came through. "By the way, there's something I need to tell you about my situation. It's complicated. Complicated. The universal code for I'm unavailable but want to have my cake and eat it too." Vanessa shoved her phone into her locker and tried to focus on work. Marcus needed his afternoon medications. Little Sarah was asking for her mommy again, and the Johnson twins were scheduled for surgery prep. Real problems. Real responsibilities. Real reasons to forget about fairy tale dinners with men who lived in different universes. But she couldn't forget. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face across that diner table, heard his voice saying her name like it mattered. The way he'd looked at her, like she was worth something, worth seeing, worth knowing. All lies. Her shift ended at 7, but she stayed late updating charts, avoiding the parking lot where his Mercedes might be waiting. When she finally emerged at 9:30, the December air hit her like punishment. He was leaning against her Honda. "You've been avoiding my calls," he said. "I've been working." She didn't look at him, fumbling with her keys. "Vanessa, about that newspaper. Congratulations." The word came out sharper than she intended. "She's beautiful. Perfect for you. It's not what you think." She finally looked at him, and the sincerity in his eyes almost broke her resolve. Almost. "What is it then? Let me guess. You're separated? Going through a divorce? It's complicated." Each word felt like swallowing glass. "Do you have any idea how pathetic that sounds?" "She's not. We're not." He ran his hands through his hair, frustration radiating from every line of his body. "Damn it, this isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Find out what? That I'm the other woman? That I'm some kind of side entertainment while you figure out your real relationship? You're not the other woman." His voice was fierce, desperate. "You're not a side anything. What happened between us?" "Nothing happened between us." The lie tasted bitter. One dinner. One conversation. That's all. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Something had happened. Something that made her chest ache and her hands shake and her heart race every time she thought about the way he'd looked at her. "You're right," he said quietly. "Nothing happened, but something was about to happen. Something important." "With your fiancé?" "There is no fiancé." "Not really." He stepped closer, and she caught that familiar cologne. "Rebecca and I. It's business. Arranged by our families when we were kids. A merger disguised as a marriage." "How convenient." "It's true." His eyes burned with intensity. "I've been trying to find a way out for years, but there are contracts, obligations." "Stop." She held up a hand. "Just stop. Do you hear yourself? You sound like every married man who's ever hit on a waitress." Next you'll tell me she doesn't understand you. She doesn't. The words came out flat, matter of fact. She understands my portfolio, my social standing, the business advantages of combining our family's interests. But me, the person I actually am, he shook his head. She's never even tried to know that man. Despite herself, Vanessa felt something crack in her chest. The pain in his voice sounded real. But pain could be performed, and she'd already proven how easy she was to fool. "That's not my problem," she said. "Isn't it?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Because last night, for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw something worth knowing. Someone who didn't care about my money or my connections or what I could do for them. You don't know what I care about. Then tell me." He was close enough to touch now, close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his body. "Tell me you didn't feel anything. Tell me it was just dinner, just conversation. Tell me I imagined the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching." Her breath caught. She had looked at him, had let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it would feel like to be wanted by someone like him. "It doesn't matter what I felt," she whispered. "It's the only thing that matters." Before she could process what was happening, his hands were in her hair, his mouth was on hers, and every rational thought dissolved in a sensation. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air, desperate and hungry and real. For a moment, one perfect, impossible moment, she kissed him back. Let herself feel what it was like to be wanted, to be desired, to be the woman someone couldn't live without. Then reality crashed back in. She pushed him away, chest heaving. "No, Vanessa, no, I won't be that woman. I won't be the one you sneak around with while you figure out your real life. You are my real life." The words came out raw, honest. Everything else is just noise. But she was already getting into her car, hands shaking as she started the engine. "I can't," she said through the cracked window. "I won't." As she drove away, she caught one last glimpse of him in her rearview mirror, standing alone in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who'd just lost everything he didn't know he wanted. Her phone rang as she reached the highway. His name on the screen. She let it ring. Some engagements are about love, others are about mergers. She was about to learn which kind could destroy everything. He appeared at her apartment at midnight, rain-soaked and desperate. Vanessa opened the door to find Daniel standing in her hallway, expensive suit clinging to his frame, water dripping from his hair. His eyes were wild, desperate, nothing like the controlled businessman from the newspaper photos. "It's not what you think," he said. "Then what is it?" She should have slammed the door, should have protected herself from whatever new lies he'd come to tell. Instead, she stepped aside and let him in. Her small living room became a courtroom where truth was evidence and love was the verdict they both feared to hear. He stood in the center of her modest space, water pooling at his feet, looking like a man about to confess his sins. "My father arranged the engagement when I was 22, he began, voice steady despite his appearance. "Thornton Industries and Hayes Industries have been discussing merger possibilities for decades. When Rebecca and I both graduated from business school, our fathers decided to make it official. How romantic. I thought I could go through with it." He ran his hands through his wet hair. "For years, I convinced myself it made sense. Good business, family expectations, social compatibility. Rebecca's smart, ambitious, comes from the right background. Everything a man could want. Everything I thought I should want." His eyes found hers across the room. "But I've never felt anything for her. Not desire, not affection, not even real friendship. We're two people playing roles our families wrote for us." Vanessa wrapped her arms around herself, trying to create barriers he kept tearing down with his honesty. "So why haven't you ended it?" "Because ending it means breaking a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It means lawsuits, family wars, business partnerships destroyed. It means disappointing everyone who's counted on this merger for years." "Poor you." The sarcasm hit its mark. Something flashed in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or recognition of how pathetic his problems sounded to someone who worried about paying rent. "You're right," he said quietly. "Poor rich boy with his arranged marriage and his business obligations. How could someone like you possibly understand?" "Someone like me?" Someone real. Someone who works for everything she has, who takes care of other people without expecting anything in return, who's never had the luxury of choosing between what she wants and what's expected. The accuracy of his words stung. Don't what? Don't make me into some noble saint just because I'm poor. Don't romanticize my life just because yours is complicated. He stepped closer, leaving wet footprints on her worn carpet. I'm not romanticizing anything. I'm telling you that meeting you changed everything. How? Because for the first time in my life, I looked at someone and wanted to be better than who I was. Not richer, not more successful, better. Worthy of the way you looked at me. The words hit her like physical blows. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked at her and seen something that made them want to grow. Pretty words, she said, but her voice shook. True words. He was close enough to touch now, close enough that she could smell rain and cologne and something purely him. I called off the engagement this morning. The room spun. What? I told Rebecca, told both our fathers, told the lawyers. It's over. Daniel, the merger's dead. There will be lawsuits, probably for years. My relationship with my family is complicated now, but it's done. She stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You destroyed business deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes. You broke contracts? Disappointed your family? Yes. Why? His answer was simple, devastating. Because I couldn't stand the thought of marrying someone else when I'd finally found the woman I wanted to spend my life knowing. The words hung between them, impossible and real. This was the moment when she should have been practical, should have thought about the chaos he'd created, the enemies he'd made, the mess that would follow him. Instead, she thought about the way he'd looked at her in the diner, the way he'd seen strength where she saw obligation, worth where she saw invisibility. You're insane, she whispered. Completely. This will destroy you. Probably. People will hate you. Your family, Rebecca's family, the board. I know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek. Do you know what I realized tonight? She shook her head. I'd rather be hated for choosing what I want than respected for accepting what I don't. The touch of his fingers sent electricity through her entire body. This was the moment of choice, the moment when she could step back into safety or step forward into chaos. She thought about her mother's voice. Baby, sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing are exactly the same thing. Instead of stepping back, she stepped forward. Their lips met in the middle, and this time she didn't pull away. This time she kissed him back with everything she'd been holding back, everything she'd been afraid to want. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers clutched his wet shirt, and for one perfect moment, nothing existed except the taste of him and the sound of rain against her windows. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I need you to know, he said quietly, this isn't about rescue. Not yours, not mine. This is about recognition. Recognition. I recognize you, he said, fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The strength you carry, the kindness you give, the way you see people who've been invisible too long. And I hope, you recognize something in me too. She did. Beneath the expensive clothes and corporate polish, she saw something familiar. Someone who'd been performing a role so long he'd forgotten who he really was. Someone who was tired of being seen for what he could provide instead of who he was. This is crazy, she said against his lips. Completely insane, he agreed, kissing her again. But as his phone rang from his jacket pocket, the ringtone harsh in the sudden quiet, they both knew the chaos was just beginning. He ignored it, but they could both see Rebecca's name flashing on the screen. The first shot in what would become a war. She had spent her career being invisible, until loving him made her a target. The call came at 6 in the morning. Vanessa's supervisor's voice was ice-cold professional, the kind that meant trouble was already knocking down doors. Miss Carter, we need you in human resources immediately. I don't start until noon today. Now, Vanessa, the human resources office felt like a tribunal. Fluorescent lights harsh as judgment, while she sat across from 3 administrators who looked at her like a problem to be solved. Margaret Hendricks sat to the left, her face carved from disappointment. Next to her, Dr. Patricia Wells, head of pediatrics, shuffled through a file folder. At the head of the table sat James Morrison, hospital administrator, whose job was making problems disappear. "Ms. Carter," Morrison began, his voice carefully neutral, "we've received concerning reports about your conduct with visitors. Visitors, specifically inappropriate personal relationships with individuals connected to our patients' families." Heat flooded her face. "I don't understand. Don't you?" Margaret's voice cut like a scalpel. "Expensive gifts, personal meetings outside work hours, public displays of affection in patient areas." Vanessa's mouth went dry. Someone had been watching. Someone had been taking notes, building a case. "Mr. Hayes visited the pediatric ward exactly once," she said carefully. "He brought flowers to thank me for helping him with a medical emergency. And then—" Dr. Wells leaned forward. "You began a personal relationship with this individual?" We had dinner. Once. In a public establishment where you discussed confidential patient information? "I never discussed any patient." Marcus Williams, age 7, leukemia patient in room 312. Dr. Wells read from file. "According to witnesses, you introduced Mr. Hayes to this child and discussed his medical condition." The room tilted. Marcus asked who he was. "I said hello." "That's not discussing confidential." "Ms. Carter." Morrison's voice was funeral quiet. "Are you currently involved in a personal relationship with Daniel Hayes?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Answer yes, and they'd paint her as unprofessional. Answer no, and she'd be lying to people who clearly already knew the truth. "My personal life has nothing to do with my job performance." "Actually, it does." Margaret slid a newspaper clipping across the table. "Especially when your personal life becomes public knowledge." The photo was grainy, probably taken with a phone from across the street. But it clearly showed Daniel kissing her in the hospital parking lot 2 nights ago. The headline read, "Millionaire CEO's Mystery Woman. Hospital staff?" Vanessa's chest tightened. Someone was watching us? "Someone's always watching people like him," Dr. Wells said. "The question is, what were you thinking getting involved with a patient's family member?" "He wasn't a patient. He wasn't family of a patient. He was someone I helped in an emergency situation. Someone who then pursued a relationship with you while you were on duty in a medical facility around vulnerable children." Morrison's words fell like hammers. "Do you understand how this looks? It looks like I helped someone and he was grateful. It looks like a staff member used her position to gain access to wealthy individuals for personal benefit." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "That's not. I would never." 2 weeks ago, you were working double shifts to make ends meet," Margaret continued. "Now you're dating a millionaire." The timing raises questions. About what? About whether you saw an opportunity and took it. Rage filled Vanessa's chest, hot and clean. "You think I'm some kind of gold digger? You think I planned this? We think you made poor choices that reflect badly on this institution." "What poor choices?" "Helping someone, being kind to a grateful visitor, having a personal life, having the wrong kind of personal life with the wrong kind of person." Dr. Wells's voice was sharp. "Ms. Carter, you're a good nurse, but you're also naive. Men like Daniel Hayes don't date women like you for the right reasons." The words stung because they echoed her own fears. But hearing them from these people she'd worked beside for 3 years, people who'd never seen her as anything more than invisible, ignited something fierce inside her. Women like me? Working class. No connections. No family money. Dr. Wells leaned forward. "I'm trying to protect you here, Vanessa. Men like him collect women like you. They don't marry them. How would you know what kind of woman I am?" Vanessa's voice was steady now, powered by anger that had been building for years. "How would any of you know? You've worked beside me for 3 years and never bothered to learn my name until it showed up in a newspaper. That's not. I work more hours than anyone else on my floor. I've never called in sick, never complained about overtime, never refused an assignment. My patient satisfaction scores are the highest in the department." She stood up, suddenly too angry to sit still. But now you want to lecture me about my choices because someone with money noticed I exist? The room fell silent. For the first time in her career, Vanessa Carter was not invisible. Ms. Carter, Morrison said carefully, we're not questioning your work performance. We're concerned about maintaining professional boundaries. Whose professional boundaries did I cross? By accepting gifts, flowers, once. By engaging in personal relationships that could compromise your judgment. With someone who isn't my patient, isn't related to my patients, and has no connection to my professional responsibilities. Ms. Carter, Dr. Wells's voice softened, became almost maternal. I know this feels unfair, but the reality is your association with someone like Daniel Hayes brings unwanted attention to this hospital. The kind of attention that raises questions about our staff's motivations and professionalism. So you want me to choose between my job and my personal life? We want you to make smart choices. Smart according to who? According to people who understand how the world works. Margaret's voice was patient, explaining obvious truths to a slow child. Men like Daniel Hayes live in a different universe. They play by different rules. And women who forget that get hurt. Before Vanessa could respond, her phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Morrison said. Put on speaker. That's not. Answer it, or we'll assume you have something to hide. With shaking hands, Vanessa answered the call. Hello. Hey, beautiful. Daniel's voice filled the room, warm and intimate. How's your morning? Heat flooded her face as 3 pairs of eyes watched her reaction. It's fine. You sound weird. Everything okay? She looked at Morrison, who gestured for her to continue the conversation normally. I'm at work, she said carefully. I know. I was hoping we could have lunch later. There's something I want to discuss with you. I don't think. It's about us. About what happened last night. His voice dropped lower, more private. About what happens next. The administrators exchanged meaningful glances. This was exactly what they'd expected. Evidence of a relationship that was becoming serious, complicated, dangerous for their sterile professional environment. I have to go, Vanessa said. Vanessa, wait. Is someone there? You sound like you're being careful about what you say. Too perceptive, too protective, too willing to fight battles she wasn't sure she wanted him fighting. I'll call you later. If someone's giving you trouble because of me, I'll call you later. She hung up before he could say anything else that would make this worse. The silence in the room was deafening. Well, Morrison said finally, that was enlightening. Ms. Carter, Dr. Wells said, we're going to recommend you take some time to think about your priorities. Paid leave, while we review your situation. You're suspending me? We're giving you space to make the right decision. Which is, in this relationship, Margaret said bluntly, before it ends your career. As Vanessa left the hospital that morning, she realized everything had changed. She was no longer invisible, but visibility came with a price she hadn't known she'd have to pay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Whatever's happening, we'll handle it together. But as she sat in her car in the parking lot where this had all started, she wondered if together was something they could survive. She learned that night what it meant to have someone fight for you with the same ruthlessness they used to build an empire. Daniel arrived at her apartment that evening like a storm dressed in a $1,000 suit. They suspended you, he said without preamble. Vanessa opened the door wider, letting him into her small space. His energy filled the room, contained fury that made the air feel electric. How do you know that? Because I made it my business to know. He paced to her window, then back, moving like a caged animal. Tell me exactly what they said. Daniel. Every word, Vanessa. I need to know what we're dealing with. She sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted. The day had felt like being slowly carved apart by people who smiled while they held the knife. They think I'm a gold digger. They think I saw an opportunity with you and took it. The words tasted bitter. They want me to choose between my job and you. His stillness was more frightening than his pacing had been. When he turned to face her, his expression was ice-cold, dangerous. They threatened your career because you're with me. They said, I don't care what they said. I care what they did. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. James Morrison, hospital administrator. Patricia Wells, head of pediatrics. Margaret Hendricks, nursing supervisor. What are you doing? Research. Daniel, stop. But he wasn't listening. He was making calls now, his voice sharp and professional. Collins, I need a complete financial workup on St. Mary's Hospital. Funding sources, board members, outstanding loans. Everything. I need it tonight. Daniel. She stood up, grabbing his arm. Stop. He looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her step back. This wasn't the man who'd kissed her in the ring. This was the CEO who'd built an empire from nothing, and who would destroy anything that threatened what he cared about. They made a mistake, he said quietly. They hurt you because of me. That makes it my problem to solve. It's not your problem to solve. It's mine. Really. His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Because from where I'm sitting, this happened because someone saw you with me and decided you didn't deserve basic respect. That's not, isn't it? He moved closer, and she could see the fury burning behind his controlled exterior. You're one of the best nurses they have. You've never had a complaint, never caused problems, never done anything but excellent work. But the moment someone with money shows interest in you, suddenly you're unprofessional. The accuracy of his words hit like physical blows. Maybe they have a point. Maybe this is happening too fast. Maybe we're from different worlds. Stop. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Don't let them make you doubt what you know is real. What if they're right? What if I'm out of my league? You want to know what league you're in? His voice was fierce, protective. You're in the league of people who save lives every day, who work double shifts because kids need someone who cares, who stop for strangers in parking lots because helping people is who you are, not what you do. Daniel, you want to know what league they're in? His smile was sharp enough to cut. They're in the league of people who punish kindness and mistake cruelty for professionalism, who think your worth is determined by who you're sleeping with instead of who you are. Before she could respond, his phone rang. Collins, talk to me. Vanessa watched his face change as he listened. His expression grew colder, more calculating. Interesting, he said finally. Send me everything. Tonight. He hung up and looked at her with something that might have been satisfaction. What? She asked. St. Mary's Hospital owes Midwest Development Bank $47 million. Loan comes due for renewal next month. So, I own a controlling interest in Midwest Development Bank. The room went still. Vanessa stared at him, processing what he'd just said. You own the bank that holds their loan? Among other things. What other things? His smile was predatory. The company that supplies their medical equipment. The firm that handles their legal work. The construction company that's renovating their East Wing. Jesus. Business is complicated. Connections matter. Leverage is everything. He sat beside her on the couch, his energy shifting from dangerous to protective. And right now, I have all the leverage. What are you going to do? Make sure they understand that attacking you was the worst business decision they've ever made. Fear and something darker. Excitement. Ward her chest. I don't want you to destroy people because of me. I'm not destroying anyone. I'm just adjusting their priorities. Daniel, they hurt you, Vanessa. They tried to take away your career because you're with me. Do you really expect me to do nothing? The question hung between them, loaded with implications she wasn't sure she was ready to face. This was power, real power, the kind that could reshape reality with a phone call. And he was offering to use it for her. What if I said yes? What if I asked you to leave it alone? He studied her face for a long moment. Then I'd leave it alone. Just like that. Just like that. His hand found hers. But I'd spend every day knowing that people were allowed to hurt you without consequences. And I'd have to live with knowing I could have stopped it, but didn't. The honesty in his voice broke something open in her chest. This wasn't about control or showing off his power. This was about protection. Messy, complicated, potentially dangerous protection from someone who'd never had anyone fight for him and didn't know how to love halfway. The hospital board meets tomorrow morning, he continued. By then, they'll have received some interesting information about their financial situation. Nothing illegal, nothing unethical. Just reminders about how interconnected the business world really is. And then they'll call you. They'll apologize for the misunderstanding. They'll reinstate you with a glowing recommendation and probably a raise. And if they don't, his smile was winter cold. Then they'll learn that some mistakes are more expensive than others. That night, as they lay tangled together on her narrow bed, Vanessa felt the shift in their relationship. This wasn't just romance anymore, it was partnership. Dangerous, intoxicating partnership that came with power she'd never imagined and responsibilities she wasn't sure she understood. "Are you okay with this?" he asked quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "With what?" "With me fighting your battles." She thought about it, really thought about it. Her whole life, she'd fought alone, survived alone, made decisions alone. The idea of someone else wielding power on her behalf should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Ask me tomorrow," she said, "after I see what you've done." His laugh rumbled against her chest. Fair enough. But as she drifted off to sleep, she wondered what she was becoming, and whether the woman who emerged from this battle would still be someone she recognized. Privacy died the moment a photographer captured them together, and suddenly their love story became everyone else's entertainment. The headline hit newsstands at 6 a.m. Gold digger nurse seduces engaged millionaire. Vanessa stared at the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times through the window of the corner store, her hands shaking as she read the subheading. Hospital staff questions motives as Hayes Industries CEO breaks high society engagement. The photo took up half the front page. Her and Daniel leaving Mario's Italian restaurant 3 nights ago, his hand on the small of her back, her face turned up toward his with an expression that looked painfully vulnerable in black and white newsprint. "You gonna buy that or just read it through the glass?" The store owner's voice made her jump. "Sorry, She fumbled for money, buying the paper with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Inside, the story was worse. Much worse. Sources close to the situation describe Vanessa Carter, 29, as a calculating opportunist who targeted Hayes during a vulnerable moment. "She saw a rich man who'd been drinking and made her move," said one hospital colleague who requested anonymity. Her phone had been ringing since 5 a.m. Unknown numbers, reporters probably, hungry for quotes and details about her relationship with Daniel. She'd stopped answering after the third call asked her to comment on allegations about her gold-digging behavior. The worst part was the quotes. Someone at the hospital, maybe multiple someones, had talked, shared details about her financial situation, her family background, her mother's medical bills. Private struggles laid out like evidence in a prosecution case. Ms. Carter has always been desperate for money, one source claimed. Working double shifts, constantly worried about bills. When someone like Daniel Hayes showed interest, of course she jumped at the chance. Another voice, identified only as longtime colleague, was even crueler. Some women will do anything for security. Vanessa always struck me as the type who'd marry for money if the opportunity arose. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Baby," Mrs. Rodriguez brought over the newspaper. "Don't you listen to any of those lies. I raised you better than that." Before she could respond, another text came through, this one from Daniel. "Don't read anything. Don't answer any calls. I'm handling this." But it was too late. She'd already read everything. Already seen herself transformed from invisible nurse into calculating predator in the span of a news cycle. By the time she made it home, 3 news vans were parked outside her apartment building. Reporters with cameras waited by the entrance, ready to capture her reaction to becoming Chicago's most notorious gold digger. She parked around the corner and snuck through the back entrance, but her phone was already buzzing with missed calls from local news stations. Channel 7 wanted an exclusive interview. Channel 11 was offering money for her side of the story. Her side of the story, as if love could be explained in sound bites and quotes. The knock on her door came at noon. Vanessa peered through the peephole to see Daniel standing in the hallway, his face grim. "You look like hell," he said when she opened the door. "Gee, thanks." But she fell into his arms anyway, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something sharper. Anger, maybe, or fear. "I'm sorry," he said against her hair. "I'm so damn sorry this is happening." "Is it true?" she asked. "About Rebecca? What she said in the interview?" His body went rigid. "What interview?" Vanessa pulled away to look at his face. You haven't seen it? Seen what? She grabbed the remote, switching to Channel 7. The new news was just starting, and Rebecca's face filled the screen. Beautiful, composed, every inch the wrong society princess. Devastated, of course, Rebecca was saying, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Daniel and I have been planning our wedding for months. But when he became involved with this woman, the camera cut to the same photo from the newspaper, Vanessa and Daniel outside the restaurant. I want people to understand, Rebecca continued, this isn't about jealousy. I'm genuinely concerned for Daniel's well-being. Men his age, with his resources, they become targets. And some women are very skilled at identifying vulnerable, wealthy men. Are you suggesting Ms. Carter deliberately pursued Mr. Hayes for financial gain? The interviewer asked. Rebecca's smile was sharp as broken glass. I'm suggesting that a woman who works multiple jobs to pay bills might see a relationship with a millionaire as an opportunity rather than romance. Daniel grabbed the remote, clicking off the TV with enough force to crack the plastic. That manipulative, he caught himself, running both hands through his hair. I should have seen this coming. Maybe she has a point, Vanessa said quietly. What? Maybe she's right. Maybe I did see an opportunity. Stop. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Don't let her poison what you know is real. How do I know what's real anymore? Every time I turn on the TV or open a newspaper, they're telling me I'm someone I don't recognize. You know, because you were there. You know what you felt, what you wanted, what this means to you. But what if? His mouth covered hers, cutting off the spiral of doubt. The kiss was desperate, claiming, a reminder of everything the cameras and headlines couldn't capture. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Rebecca's doing this because she's cornered, he said. The engagement's over, the merger's dead, and her family's furious. This is revenge. At my expense. At both our expense. His eyes hardened, but she made a mistake going public. Now, this becomes a different kind of war. What do you mean? Before he could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her supervisor's number. Answer it, Daniel said. Ms. Carter? Margaret's voice was carefully neutral. We need to discuss your situation. My situation? In light of recent media attention, the hospital feels it would be best if you took extended leave while we review our policies regarding staff conduct. You're firing me because of newspaper gossip. We're protecting the hospital's reputation. And yours. My reputation? Vanessa's voice cracked. What about my reputation? MS. Carter, surely you understand that this level of media scrutiny isn't sustainable for someone in your position. What position? Being poor? Being with someone you don't think I deserve? The line went quiet for a moment. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was softer but no less final. Clear out your locker by end of business today. Security will escort you. The call ended, leaving Vanessa staring at her phone in disbelief. They fired me, she said. Daniel's expression went dangerous. On what grounds? Media attention. They said it wasn't sustainable. Bullshit. He was already pulling out his phone. They fired you because someone with money wants you, and they can't stand the idea that one of their invisible staff members might actually deserve happiness. Daniel don't. But he was already making calls, his voice sharp and businesslike as he spoke to lawyers, public relations firms, people whose job was managing disasters and destroying enemies. As she listened to him orchestrate her defense, Vanessa realized this was her life now. Not just love, but war. Not just Daniel, but everything that came with him, the power, the enemies, the spotlights that turned private moments into public spectacle. The question was whether she was strong enough to survive it, or whether the woman who emerged from this battle would be someone worth loving at all. She had stayed quiet while they called her names, until they attacked her patience and her profession. The press conference was Daniel's idea, but the words were all hers. I know what you think you know about me, Vanessa began, looking directly into the cameras that had been hunting her for 3 days. You think I'm a gold digger, an opportunist, a woman who saw a wealthy man and decided to cash in. The room was packed with reporters, their faces skeptical, their questions loaded with judgment she'd grown tired of carrying. But behind the cameras, Daniel sat in the front row, his presence steady and encouraging. "Let me tell you what I actually am," she continued. "I'm a pediatric ICU nurse. For the past 6 years, I've held the hands of dying children and helped them find courage in their darkest moments. I've worked Christmas mornings and missed family dinners because a 7-year-old with cancer needed someone to read him stories when he couldn't sleep." Her voice grew stronger with each word. For years, she'd been invisible. Today, she refused to disappear. "I work double shifts not because I'm greedy for money, but because healthcare is expensive and my mother has diabetes. I live in a small apartment in Cleveland, not because I lack ambition, but because taking care of people you love sometimes means making sacrifices." A reporter in the third row raised her hand. "Ms. Carter, critics say you targeted Mr. Hayes specifically because of his wealth." "Critics say a lot of things," Vanessa interrupted. "Most of those critics have never worked a day in a hospital. They've never held a child while he gets chemotherapy. They've never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries." She stepped closer to the microphone, her nervousness transforming into something sharper. "I helped a stranger who needed assistance. That stranger turned out to be someone I connected with, someone who saw me as more than just my bank account or my job title. If that makes me calculating, then I guess every person who's ever fallen in love is guilty of the same crime." Another hand shot up. "What about Mr. Hayes's broken engagement? Doesn't that suggest?" "It suggests that sometimes people make commitments for the wrong reasons and find the courage to choose what's real over what's expected." Vanessa's eyes found Daniel's across the room. "It suggests that love doesn't always happen according to schedule or social approval. But the timing was terrible," Vanessa admitted. "Meeting Daniel complicated his life and mine in ways neither of us expected. But since when is love convenient? Since when does it arrive at the perfect moment for everyone involved?" The questions kept coming, but something had shifted in the room. Her honesty was cutting through the narrative they'd built about calculating gold diggers and victimized millionaires. "Ms. Carter," a young woman from the Tribune asked, "how do you respond to allegations that you're out of your league?" The question hit different than the others. Personal instead of accusatory. "You know what?" Vanessa said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Maybe I'm out my league. Maybe dating someone with money and power and connections is complicated in ways I never imagined." Daniel leaned forward in his chair. "But I'm also really good at learning. I'm good at adapting, at working harder when things get difficult, at not giving up when people tell me I don't belong." She paused. "And I'm especially good at taking care of people I love." "Is that what this is?" another reporter called out. "Love." For the first time since the nightmare started, Vanessa smiled. A real smile, not the careful expression she'd been wearing like armor. "Yeah," she said simply. "That's what this is." After the press conference, as reporters filed out and cameras were packed away, Daniel approached the podium where she still stood. "That was," he began, "terrifying, amazing." His eyes held something she'd never seen before. Not just desire or affection, but respect. Deep, genuine respect for the woman who just faced down a room full of skeptics and emerged stronger. "Think it'll help?" "I think," he said, pulling her into his arms, "you just reminded everyone what they forgot while they were busy judging you." "What's that?" "That you're extraordinary." That evening, as they watched the news coverage from her apartment, Vanessa realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in how the world saw her, but in how she saw herself. The invisible woman was gone. The one who replaced her was still figuring out who she was, but she knew one thing for certain. She was tired of apologizing for taking up space. "Channel 7's calling it a compelling defense," Daniel said, reading news alerts on his phone. "Channel 11 says you humanized a tabloid story. What about Rebecca?" Any response from her? Daniel's expression darkened. Radio silence, which probably means she's planning something. As if summoned by his words, Vanessa's phone rang. Unknown number, but something told her to answer. "Vanessa Carter?" "Yes." "This is Rebecca Thornton." The voice was crisp, controlled, nothing like the tearful victim from the TV interviews. "I think we should talk." Vanessa looked at Daniel, who was already reaching for the phone. She shook her head, keeping it pressed to her ear. "What do you want?" to make you an offer. I am listening. Walk away. End this relationship. Leave Chicago. And I'll make sure the media forgets you exist. You'll get your job back, your privacy back, your normal life back. And if I don't, Rebecca's laugh was cold as winter wind. Then you'll discover that fighting me is more expensive than you can afford. The line went dead, leaving Vanessa staring at her phone. What did she say? Daniel asked. She offered me an exit. And Vanessa thought about her old life, the invisibility, the safety, the small, predictable world where she never had to worry about cameras or headlines or enemies with more money than conscience. Then she looked at Daniel, at the man who'd seen her worth before she believed in it herself, who'd fought battles she never asked him to fight, who'd made her visible in ways that terrified and exhilarated her. I told her no, she said. You didn't actually tell her anything. I didn't hang up. With women like Rebecca, that's the same as declaring war. Daniel's smile was proud and worried in equal measure. You know this gets harder now, right? She's not going to stop. Neither am I. But as they settled in for what felt like the calm before a storm, Vanessa wondered if she truly understood what she'd just committed herself to. Rebecca Thornton didn't make idle threats. And some battles, once started, could only end with complete victory or total destruction. She thought she was prepared for Rebecca's war, until she realized the battlefield had been chosen long before they met. The charity gala invitation arrived with Vanessa's morning coffee, cream-colored cardstock that screamed old money and older traditions. The Thornton Foundation's annual Winter Ball, Chicago's most exclusive social event, where admission cost more than most people made in 6 months. You're not going, Daniel said, reading the invitation over her shoulder. Says who? His reflection met her eyes in the bathroom mirror as she applied mascara with hands that refused to shake. 3 weeks of public battles had taught her to steady her nerves when everything inside her wanted to run. Says someone who knows Rebecca better than you do. His voice carried worry wrapped in authority. This is an invitation, Vanessa. It's a trap. Then why accept? Because ignoring it makes me look weak. And because she turned to face him, mascara wand still in hand. Because I'm tired of hiding from people who think I don't belong. The hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal and contempt. Vanessa entered wearing a black dress Daniel had insisted on buying. Designer silk that cost more than her monthly rent, but felt like armor against the stares that followed her entrance. Conversations died as she walked past. Women in diamonds whispered behind gloved hands while their husbands assessed her with the kind of attention that made Daniel's jaw clench beside her. Mrs. Patterson, Daniel nodded to an older woman whose pearls probably funded small countries. Beautiful event. Daniel, her smile could have frozen champagne. And this must be your friend. The pause before friend carried enough poison to kill houseplants. Vanessa Carter, Vanessa said, extending her hand. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Patterson's handshake lasted exactly 2 seconds. How interesting. And what do you do, dear? I'm a nurse. How noble. The words dripped with condescension. Working with sick children, isn't it? So rewarding to help the less fortunate. Before Vanessa could respond, a voice cut through the tension like expensive steel. Patricia, still practicing your charity face, I see. Rebecca Thornton approached with the kind of smile that belonged on sharks. She looked stunning. Ice blue gown, sapphires at her throat. Every inch the society princess wronged by love. Rebecca, darling. Mrs. Patterson's voice warmed considerably. You look radiant. Thank you. Rebecca's eyes never left Vanessa's face. And Vanessa, how brave of you to come. Though I suppose nurses are used to walking into difficult situations. We are, Vanessa replied, usually to help people who are suffering. Rebecca's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. How fortunate. There's certainly plenty of suffering to go around these days. She moved closer, her perfume expensive and cloying. Daniel, you look well. A little tired, perhaps, but well. Rebecca. His voice was careful, controlled. Thank you for the invitation. Oh, this isn't my party. Rebecca's smile sharpened. It's the foundation's. Though I did suggest we include everyone who's been making headlines lately. Community outreach, you understand." The words landed like slaps. Around them, conversations had stopped entirely. The entire ballroom was watching this collision of old money and new scandal, waiting to see who would draw first blood. "How thoughtful," Vanessa said. "I imagine raising money for charity requires including people who actually work for a living." A gasp rippled through the nearby crowd. Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment, showing something cold and dangerous underneath. "Indeed, though I sometimes wonder about people's motivations. Whether they're truly interested in helping others or simply helping themselves." "That's a fascinating question," Vanessa replied, "especially coming from someone whose main contribution to society seems to be wearing expensive dresses to parties." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Rebecca's smile became razor-sharp. "Ladies," Daniel said quietly, "perhaps we should—" "Oh no," Rebecca interrupted. "I'm enjoying this conversation. It's so rare to meet someone so direct about their ambitions." She stepped closer to Vanessa, close enough that her next words were almost whispers. "Tell me, dear, when you looked at Daniel that night outside the bar, what did you see? A man who needed help? Or an opportunity that couldn't be missed?" "I saw someone who looked lost," Vanessa answered honestly. "Someone who seemed lonely despite being surrounded by all this." She gestured to the ballroom full of wealth and pretense. "How romantic. And completely coincidental, I'm sure, that the lonely man happened to be worth several $100 million. "Completely coincidental," Vanessa agreed. "Just like it's coincidental that you're having this conversation in front of cameras." Rebecca's eyes flashed. "What cameras?" Vanessa smiled for the first time since entering the ballroom. "The security cameras you installed to document this moment. The photographers you hired to capture whatever scene you're planning. The reporters you've stationed near the exits." The older woman's confidence wavered slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." Vanessa's voice carried new strength. "You invited us here to humiliate me publicly, to show Chicago society that I don't belong, that I'm out of my league, that women like me should know our place. And don't you know my place?" Vanessa looked around the ballroom, at the wealth, the judgment, the careful cruelty disguised as civility. "Yeah, Edo. My place is taking care of people who are actually sick instead of people who are just sick inside." She turned to Daniel, whose expression held pride and worry in equal measure. "I think I've seen enough charity for one evening." As they walked toward the exit, Rebecca's voice followed them across the marble floor. "This isn't over, Vanessa." Without turning around, Vanessa called back, "You're right. It's just beginning." But as they left the ballroom, she wondered if she'd just declared a war she couldn't win. She discovered that night how far desperate people will go to destroy what they can't control. The call came at 3 in the morning. Vanessa's mother's voice was shaky, confused, frightened in ways that made Vanessa's blood turn to ice. "Baby, there are men here. At the house. They say they're from the bank, but it's the middle of the night. Mom, lock the doors. Don't let anyone in. I'm coming." Daniel was already awake beside her, reading the fear in her voice even through sleep. "What's wrong?" "Someone's at my mother's house. Middle of the night, claiming they're from the bank." She was already pulling on clothes, hands shaking as she searched for her keys. "I'm coming with you." "Daniel, I'm coming with you." The drive to Cleveland felt endless. Vanessa's phone rang twice, both calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Daniel answered the second one, his voice sharp and dangerous. "Who is this? How did you get this number?" She couldn't hear the response, but she watched his face go cold. "Listen carefully," he said. "If anything happens to that woman or her house, I will destroy you and everyone you work for. Do you understand me?" He hung up and immediately made another call. "Collins, I need private security at this address immediately. Armed. Professional. Now." When they reached her childhood home, 3 black SUVs were parked outside. Men in expensive suits stood on her mother's front porch, their presence somehow managing to look both official and threatening. "Stay in the car," Daniel said. Like hell. They approached the house together. The men turned as they walked up the driveway, and Vanessa recognized the type immediately. Corporate security, the kind who were paid to intimidate without technically breaking laws. "Gentlemen," Daniel's voice carried authority that made the men step back slightly. "I believe you're trespassing on private property. We're here on behalf of Midwest Development Bank," the tallest one said. "Mrs. Carter has defaulted on her mortgage payments." "That's impossible," Vanessa said. "Her mortgage is current. I'll make sure of that." The man smiled without warmth. "According to our records, she missed payments in September and October. The property is subject to immediate foreclosure proceedings." "Show me the records." He handed her a folder full of official-looking documents. As Vanessa scanned them, her confusion turned to cold understanding. The missed payments were real, but the account they'd supposedly been paid from was one she'd never seen before, an account that had been opened in her name without her knowledge, used to create a paper trail of financial irresponsibility. "This is fraud," she said quietly. "This is business," the man replied. "Mrs. Carter has 24 hours to vacate the premises." "No." Daniel's voice cut through the night air like a blade. "She has 24 hours to retain a lawyer, file an injunction, and prove this entire situation is manufactured harassment." The men exchanged glances. Their leader pulled out his phone, speaking in low tones to whoever was on the other end. "Sir," he said to Daniel after ending the call, "I've been instructed to inform you that this situation could be resolved quickly if certain other situations were resolved first." "What other situations?" "Personal situations. Relationship situations. The kind that have been causing problems for everyone involved." The threat was clear. End the relationship, and the foreclosure disappears. Continue fighting, and Vanessa's mother loses the only home she'd ever known. Daniel stepped closer to the man, close enough that his voice carried barely controlled violence. "Go back to whoever sent you. Tell them they just made the biggest mistake of their professional lives." After the men left, Vanessa sat on her mother's couch, holding hands that had raised her alone, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, never complained about the sacrifices required to love someone unconditionally. "I'm sorry, Mom." "For what, baby?" "For bringing this to your door. For dating someone whose world is so toxic it poisons everyone around him." Her mother's weathered hands cupped her face. "Vanessa Marie Carter, you listen to me. You didn't bring anything to my door except a man who loves you enough to drive 3 hours in the middle of the night to make sure I'm safe. But they're attacking you because of me. They're attacking me because they're bullies who think terrorizing an old woman will make you do what they want." Her mother's voice grew steel strong. "But I didn't raise a daughter who bows down to bullies. What if they take the house? Then I'll find another house. What I won't find is another chance for my daughter to be happy with someone who sees her worth." From the kitchen, they could hear Daniel on the phone, his voice sharp and businesslike as he spoke to lawyers, investigators, people whose job was unraveling fraud and destroying the people who committed it. "He's going to war for you," her mother observed. "That's what scares me." "Why?" Vanessa looked toward the kitchen, where the man she loved was methodically dismantling the lives of people who dared to threaten her family. "Because once you start a war like this, I don't think you can ever really stop." Her mother squeezed her hands. "Some wars are worth fighting, baby. The question is, what are you willing to fight for?" As Daniel returned to the living room, his face grim but determined, Vanessa realized the question wasn't what she was willing to fight for. The question was what she was willing to sacrifice to win. She thought she knew who Daniel was, until she learned what he was truly capable of when the people he loved were threatened. The files arrived at her apartment the next morning, 3 boxes of documents that Daniel's investigators had compiled in less than 12 hours. As Vanessa opened the first box, she realized she was looking at the blueprint of her own destruction. "Rebecca didn't just decide to destroy me," she said, scanning financial records and phone logs. "She's been planning this for months." Daniel sat across from her at her small kitchen table, his face grim as he reviewed another stack of papers. "Since before we met, actually, she's been investigating any woman I've ever been seen with. Any woman? Waitresses, shop clerks, anyone who might potentially become a threat to the engagement." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "She had private investigators following me for over a year." Vanessa stared at a photograph of herself leaving the hospital, taken weeks before she'd ever met Daniel. In the margin, someone had written notes about her financial situation, her mother's medical bills, her work schedule. She knew about me before I knew about her. She knew about everyone. Sarah, the barista at the coffee shop near my office. Maria, the woman who cleans my gym. Jennifer, my dentist's receptionist. He looked up from the papers. She had files on all of them. Files about what? Financial vulnerabilities, personal problems, family situations that could be exploited if any of them got too close to me. The scope of Rebecca's surveillance made Vanessa's skin crawl. But what truly terrified her was the systematic nature of it. This wasn't jealousy or impulse. This was calculated, methodical control designed to isolate Daniel from any genuine human connection. Daniel, this is insane. I know. He reached across the table, touching her hand. But there's more. He opened a second box, revealing bank statements and legal documents that told a different story. The engagement wasn't just business, he said quietly. It was necessary. Rebecca's family has been laundering money through the Thornton Foundation for years. When our fathers arranged the marriage, it gave them access to Hayes Industries' clean financial reputation. What kind of money laundering? The kind that involves people who don't forgive debt. His voice was careful, controlled. My father borrowed from some very dangerous people to expand the business. When he died, that debt transferred to me. Vanessa felt something cold settle in her chest. How dangerous? The kind who make people disappear when they don't get paid. Jesus, Daniel, why didn't you tell me? Because I've been trying to find a way out for years. The marriage to Rebecca would have cleaned the debt, legitimized the money flow, made everyone happy. He looked at her with eyes that held years of trapped frustration. Until I met you. And now I've broken the engagement, canceled the merger, and effectively declared war on people who don't lose gracefully. As Vanessa absorbed this information, Daniel opened the third box. The contents made her blood freeze. Photos, dozens of them. Her leaving work, grocery shopping, visiting her mother. But these weren't surveillance photos taken from a distance. These were close-up shots taken by someone who'd been near enough to touch her. How long? She whispered. 2 weeks. Since the night at the charity gala. She's been having me followed by people who aren't just taking pictures. His voice was deadly quiet. Collins found something else. He handed her a single piece of paper. A plane ticket, one way, purchased under her name for a flight to Seattle, leaving tomorrow. I didn't buy this. We know. But according to the credit card records, you did. Using an account that was opened with your social security number and forged identification. The room spun as Vanessa realized the full scope of what was happening. She's going to make it look like I ran away. Or worse. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. Vanessa, there are people who would pay a lot of money to make you disappear permanently. People who see our relationship as a threat to very expensive business arrangements. What are you saying? I'm saying Rebecca isn't just trying to destroy your reputation anymore. She's trying to eliminate you entirely. The fear that had been building in Vanessa's chest transformed into something harder, colder. And what are you going to do about it? Daniel's smile was winter cold. I'm going to remind everyone why it's a mistake to threaten the people I love. How? By being someone they should have been afraid of all along. He pulled out his phone, making a call that was answered on the first ring. Collins, it's time to release everything we have on the Thornton family. Financial crimes, tax evasion, the money laundering through the foundation. All of it. Vanessa watched as the man she loved systematically destroyed lives with a phone call. His voice was calm, professional, absolutely ruthless as he orchestrated the downfall of people who'd made the mistake of threatening her. And Collins? Make sure the FBI gets copies of everything, especially the parts about their business partners. The kind of partners who don't like attention from federal investigators. When he hung up, Vanessa stared at him with a mixture of admiration and fear. Who are you? She asked quietly. Someone who's been playing by other people's rules for too long. He reached for her hand. Someone who's tired of letting other people define what I'm allowed to want. Daniel, if you do this, if you release those files, there's no going back. Good. I don't want to go back. But the consequences of not doing it are worse. His eyes were fierce, protective, completely focused on her. They threatened you, Vanessa. They threatened your mother. They try to take away everything that matters to you. What about what matters to you? Your business, your reputation, your family relationships. You matter to me. The words were simple, final. Everything else is just noise. As she looked into his eyes, Vanessa realized she was seeing the real Daniel Hayes for the first time. Not the polished CEO or the society prince, but someone who'd been caged by expectations and obligations for so long that freedom looked like destruction. Are you sure about this? I'm sure about you, he said. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. But as Vanessa watched him prepare to burn down everything he'd built in the name of protecting her, she wondered if some prices were too high to pay, even for love. She realized that night that some battles end not with victory, but with transformation. And sometimes the person you become is someone you don't recognize. The FBI raid on Thornton Industries happened at dawn, federal agents carrying boxes of evidence from offices that had hosted charity galas and money laundering operations in equal measure. Vanessa watched the news coverage from Daniel's penthouse, coffee growing cold in her hands as helicopters circled the building where Rebecca's family had built their empire on other people's crimes. 16 federal charges, Daniel said, reading updates on his phone. Tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering. Rebecca has been arrested. Her father's in federal custody. What about the people they were working with? The dangerous ones? Running. The FBI raid spooked them enough that they're more concerned about staying out of prison than collecting debts. Vanessa should have felt relieved, should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt hollow, like something essential had been carved out of her chest. It's over, she said. Yeah, it's over. But the way he said it made her look at him more closely. Daniel stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city where he'd just destroyed people's lives with the efficiency of a man signing business contracts. Are you okay? She asked. His laugh was bitter. Am I okay? I just sent my former fiancée to federal prison. I've broken business relationships that took decades to build. I made enemies of people who used to be family friends. He turned to face her. But you're safe. Your mother's safe. So yeah, I'm okay. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like mourning. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize, but somehow knew she had to answer. Hello. This is Janet Morrison from Channel 7 News. We're preparing a story about the Thornton Industries investigation. Would you like to comment on your role in bringing this criminal organization to justice? My role. Sources say you uncovered evidence of financial crimes during your relationship with Daniel Hayes. Our viewers would love to hear how a pediatric nurse helped take down one of Chicago's most powerful families. Vanessa hung up without answering, but the phone rang again immediately. Channel 11 this time, then the Tribune, then CNN. They think I'm some kind of hero, she told Daniel. Aren't you? I didn't uncover anything. I didn't investigate crimes or gather evidence. I just fell in love with someone whose world was more complicated than I understood. And because you refused to disappear when they told you to, their crimes came to light. Because you refused to let them hurt me. The distinction mattered more than she could explain. In a media narrative already taking shape, she was the brave nurse who'd brought down corruption through love and determination. In reality, she was a woman who'd watched the man she loved become someone capable of destroying lives without hesitation. Vanessa. His voice was gentle, but she could hear the question underneath. What's wrong? I don't know who we are anymore. We're the same people we were yesterday. Are we? She looked around his penthouse, marble and crystal and views that cost more than most people made in lifetimes. Yesterday, I was an invisible nurse from Cleveland. Today, I'm the woman who helped bring down a criminal empire. Yesterday, you were a man trapped in business obligations. Today, you're someone who can destroy families with a phone call. Those families were criminals. I know, and they deserved what happened to them. But Daniel, she struggled to find words for the fear growing in her chest. What happens the next time someone threatens us? What happens when normal disagreements feel like warfare because we've learned we can win wars? He crossed the room, sitting beside her on the leather couch that probably cost more than her car. Are you having second thoughts? I'm having all the thoughts. She leaned into his warmth, breathing in cologne that had become home. I love you. I love that you fought for me, protected me, made sure I was safe. But I'm scared of what we became in the process. What did we become? Dangerous. The word hung between them, heavy with truth they both recognized. Maybe that's not bad, Daniel said quietly. Maybe being dangerous means people won't try to hurt us again. Or maybe it means we've forgotten how to be anything else. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the news, baby. Are you okay? Such a simple question with such a complicated answer. I need to go home, Vanessa said suddenly. This is home. No, Cleveland is home. The hospital, my patients, the world where I know who I am and what I'm supposed to do. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. And what about us? I don't know. The honesty hurt them both, but it was the only truth she had. She loved him with intensity that scared her, loved him enough to understand why he'd burned down his old life to protect her. But love and compatibility weren't the same thing, and power changed people in ways that couldn't be undone. I need time to think, she said. Time to figure out if the woman I became during this fight is someone I want to be. How much time? I don't know that either. He nodded, accepting her uncertainty with grace that made her love him more and doubt them more at the same time. What if you decide you don't want this life? He asked. What if you decide you can't go back to being the man who stops for strangers in parking lots? Neither of them had answers. That night, as Vanessa packed the few belongings she'd brought to his world, she realized winning had taught them something terrible. Sometimes getting everything you want shows you that what you wanted wasn't what you needed. And sometimes the person who emerges victorious from a war is someone neither of you recognizes anymore. 3 months apart taught them both the difference between loving someone and being able to build a life with them. The pediatric ICU felt different when Vanessa returned. The same beeping monitors, the same worried parents in waiting rooms, the same children fighting battles no one should have to fight. But she moved through the familiar rhythms with new awareness of how much she'd changed. You're famous now, Marcus said during her first shift back. He was in remission, his leukemia responding to treatments that might not have been possible at a smaller hospital. I saw you on TV. I'm the same person I always was. Nah, his 7-year-old wisdom was absolute. You stand different now, like you're not afraid of taking up space. He was right. The invisible woman who'd once moved through halls like a ghost was gone. In her place stood someone who made eye contact, spoke up in staff meetings, didn't apologize for existing. The change should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like loss. Daniel called every evening at 7. Their conversations were careful, polite, full of the kind of small talk that people use to avoid discussing larger truths. How was work? Good. We had a 6-year-old come in with pneumonia, but she's responding well to treatment. How was your day? Long board meetings about restructuring the company now that we're not merging with Thornton Industries. They talked around the silence growing between them, around the questions neither was brave enough to ask. The media attention had faded, but its effects lingered. Vanessa's apartment received forwarded mail from reporters wanting interviews. Her supervisor treated her with new respect tinged with wariness, as if she were a bomb that might explode without warning. You're different, her mother observed during Sunday dinner. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. You used to make yourself small, baby. Now you take up the space you deserve. Is that good or bad? Her mother studied her face. Depends. Are you happy? Vanessa pushed food around her plate, avoiding the question that kept her awake at 3 in the morning. I miss him, she said finally. But I don't miss the person I was becoming around him. The woman who watched him destroy lives and felt proud instead of horrified. The woman who thought power was more important than kindness. Who says you have to choose? Reality. His world doesn't reward kindness, Mom. It rewards winning. And I'm good at winning now. That's what scares me. 3 weeks later, Daniel appeared at the hospital during her lunch break. He looked tired, older somehow, wearing the expression of someone who'd been carrying questions too heavy for one person. We need to talk, he said. They walked to the same diner where they'd had their first real conversation when the gap between their worlds had seemed like something love could bridge. I've been thinking, he said over coffee that tasted like memory and regret. About, about what you said, about who we became during the fight. Vanessa waited, knowing this conversation would change everything. You were right, he continued. I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could destroy people without losing sleep, who could make enemies disappear with phone calls. You were protecting me. I was. But I was also protecting the idea of us. The fantasy that we could have love without consequences, that we could bridge our worlds without either of us changing. The truth hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. I spent 3 months trying to go back to who I was before, Daniel said. The man who stopped for strangers, who saw people instead of opportunities. But that man doesn't exist anymore. Because of me, because of us. Because fighting for you taught me what I'm capable of when I stopped playing by other people's rules. Vanessa felt tears she'd been holding back for months finally surface. And I've spent 3 months trying to figure out if I can love the person I became around you. Someone who could watch you destroy lives and feel grateful instead of horrified. Can you? I don't know. But I know I can't unknow what it feels like to have that kind of power. I can't go back to being completely invisible. They sat in silence, mourning the simple love that had existed before power and publicity and the need to fight wars. So what do we do? Daniel asked. I think, Vanessa said slowly, we admit that love isn't always enough. The words hurt them both, but they were true. Love hadn't prepared them for the complexity of merging worlds that operated by different rules. Love hadn't warned them that protecting each other would require becoming people they weren't sure they liked. I don't regret fighting for you, Daniel said quietly. I don't regret being worth fighting for. But I think we fell in love with who we were before we knew what we were capable of becoming. As they sat in the diner where it had all begun, Vanessa realized some endings were more honest than happy endings. Sometimes loving someone meant accepting that you'd grown in directions that led away from each other. Sometimes the most courageous thing wasn't fighting for love. It was knowing when to let it go. 1 year later, she discovered that some stories don't end. They transform into something neither love nor loss, but recognition of what matters most. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. Cream-colored cardstock that carried no surprise but still made Vanessa's hands shake slightly as she read her own name written in elegant script. Daniel Hayes and Sarah Elizabeth Montgomery request the pleasure of your company. She studied the photo on the announcement page. Daniel in a black tuxedo, his arm around a woman who looked kind, intelligent, completely at peace in a way Rebecca had never managed. Sarah was a pediatric surgeon at Northwestern Memorial, someone whose world intersected with his through charity work rather than business mergers. You okay? Her co-worker Jessica asked, noticing the invitation on Vanessa's desk. Yeah, a friend is getting married. The word friend felt inadequate for what Daniel had been, what he still was in the complicated geography of her heart. They'd talked twice in the past year, carefully polite conversations that danced around everything they'd meant to each other. Are you going? Vanessa looked at the invitation again, at the date 3 weeks away, at the venue where Chicago's most powerful families would gather to celebrate a union that made sense in ways there's never had. I don't think so. That evening, she sat in her apartment, larger now, in a better neighborhood, furnished with pieces she'd chosen instead of accepting, and composed a text message she rewrote 17 times. Congratulations. She looks wonderful. I hope you're happy. His response came an hour later. Thank you. I am. Are you? She stared at the question for a long time before answering honestly, getting there. Because she was. The past year had been about discovering who Vanessa Carter was when she wasn't invisible, when she didn't need rescuing, when she took up space because she deserved to exist in the world. She'd been promoted to charge nurse, leading the pediatric ICU team with confidence that came from knowing her own worth. She'd started a support group for families of critically ill children, using skills she'd learned from watching Daniel navigate complex emotional situations. She'd even started dating, carefully, slowly, a resident named Michael who made her laugh and never made her feel like she had to choose between kindness and strength. But Daniel's impact lived in her bones, in the way she moved through the world now. The invisible woman was gone forever, replaced by someone who spoke up in meetings, who didn't apologize for taking vacation days, who understood that being seen was a choice she could make. Marcus, now 9 and cancer-free, visited her every few months. During his last visit, he'd studied her face with the intensity that made him such a remarkable kid. "You look happy," he'd announced. "I am. Different happy than before." "What do you mean?" "Before, you were happy helping other people be happy. Now you're happy being yourself." The observation hit her with startling accuracy. She was happy, not the desperate gratitude of someone rescued from invisibility, but the steady contentment of someone who'd rescued herself. Her phone rang as she was getting ready for bed. Daniel's name on the screen made her heart skip in ways that probably weren't fair to Michael, but some reactions couldn't be trained away. "Hello. I know it's late. I am sorry. It's okay. Congratulations, by the way. Sarah seems wonderful. She is. She makes me want to be better, but not different. Does that make sense?" It did. Perfect sense. "I'm glad," Vanessa said, and meant it. "You deserve someone who loves who you already are. So do you." The words carried weight of shared history, of understanding that came from having changed each other in ways that couldn't be undone. "Vanessa, I need to ask you something." "Okay. Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" She looked around her apartment, at the life she'd built from the ashes of invisibility, at the woman she'd become through love and loss and the courage to take up space in the world. "No," she said finally. "Even the parts that hurt. Even the ending. You taught me I was worth fighting for, and I taught myself I was worth saving." "Good." His voice was soft, final. "That's what I hoped." After they hung up, Vanessa sat in her living room, thinking about the strange mathematics of love. How something that ended could still add value to your life. How someone could change you completely and still not be the person you were meant to build a future with. She thought about the woman who'd stopped for a stranger in a parking lot. Invisible, afraid, convinced she didn't deserve to be seen. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned her own worth through being loved completely and loving completely in return. The next morning, she wrote a letter instead of attending the wedding. "Dear Daniel, I won't be at your wedding, but I'll be thinking of you both. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for fighting for me when I didn't know I was worth the battle. Thank you for letting me go when holding on would have hurt us both. Some love stories don't end with forever. Some end with transformation. Some end with two people who are better for having loved each other, even when they can't stay together. You were worth more than gold to me, not because of your money or your power, but because you helped me discover I was worth something too. Be happy. Be kind. Be the man who stops for strangers, even when it's complicated. With love and gratitude, Vanessa **. She sealed the letter and mailed it that afternoon, then went to work where sick children needed someone who understood that being seen was sometimes the most powerful medicine of all. That evening, Michael brought dinner and terrible jokes and the kind of easy companionship that didn't require transformation or warfare. As they talked about normal things, work and weekend plans, and whether to paint the kitchen yellow or blue, Vanessa realized she'd learned something invaluable from loving Daniel Hayes. She'd learned the difference between being rescued and being seen. She'd learned that love could change you without requiring you to lose yourself. She learned that sometimes the most generous thing you could do for someone was let them go before you both forgot who you were before the fighting started. And she learned that being worth more than gold had nothing to do with money and everything to do with recognizing your own value, whether or not anyone else could see it. 6 months later, when Marcus asked her if she missed the fancy man from the newspaper, she thought carefully before answering. "I miss him," she said, "but I don't miss needing to be rescued." "Good," Marcus said with 9-year-old wisdom. "Heroes are supposed to save themselves." He was right. Heroes were supposed to save themselves. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, they got to save each other along the way, even if they couldn't stay together forever, even if love wasn't enough to bridge every gap, even when the most loving thing was learning to let go. Because some stories weren't about endings, they were about becoming. And Vanessa Carter had become someone worth more than gold, with or without a prince to tell her so. The end. Thanks for following this story, viewers. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not when we find our fairy tale, but when we discover we were never the person who needed rescuing in the first place. What did you think of Vanessa and Daniel's journey? Have you ever grown apart from someone you loved because you both changed in different directions? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow for more stories about love, loss, and the courage to become who you're meant to be. Asterisk.